Though this episode didn't have the brutal action of its predecessor, it most definitely made up for it with its density. There was just so much here that if I tried to cover it absolutely all, we'd be here all day. In turn, I'm going to be breaking down the most important developments and takeaways rather than sifting through every single little detail. Following a montage of mourning in the wake of Rhaenys' death, the episode begins with Criston and his forces returning to King's Landing. Knowing they would have to traverse through a sea of small folk, Criston made two key decisions here. The first is deciding to parade Meleys's head through the city for all to see, his logic being that it will help convey the sheer strength of King Aegon to the commoners. In a clever juxtaposition, however, that very king is hidden away in a dirty storage box, to conceal his true fate and presence at all from the common folk. The parading of Meleys's head, however, had the opposite effect on the commoners than Criston intended. They see it as a black omen, a deed that Rhaenyra will return fire on tenfold. This is also the first time the small folk are seeing a dead dragon, or really even comprehending that a dragon could die in the first place. They went from seeing the dragons as gods to creatures that are defeatable. As Hugh Hammer puts it best, it's just meat. A weird issue with this sequence, however, is just how Criston's party returned to King's Landing so fast. We heard in last week's episode that it took Criston and his forces about a month to make it from King's Landing to Rook's Rest on foot. Initially, I just assumed there was a time jump and that the scene simply was taking place a month after the battle. However, Meleys's head is still smoking, and Aegon is still in his armor. All in all, logistically, it just doesn't make much sense. Speaking of Aegon, we see that he's still clinging on to life, though immensely injured. His hair is all gone, and his skin is burned into a melting layer of crisp flesh. Ironically, these injuries leave Aegon looking an awful lot like Viserys, the father he hated, did toward the tail end of his life. As is expressed later at the Green Faction Small Council meeting, Aegon is not in any sort of condition to function as ruler. In turn, a regent, or a temporary ruler, must be put in place to ensure the continuity of the war and the management of the kingdom. Alicent, having essentially been regent during the final years of Viserys' reign, is the obvious logical choice given her experience, and she says as such. However, the reality of her situation quickly comes crashing down on her when almost all of the men on the council, even the one she trusted most, turn against her in favor of Aemond. Surprisingly, the only one to stand up for her proposal is Grand Maester Orwyle. As Aemond is almost unanimously selected as regent, Alicent begins to disassociate into what appears to be a minor panic attack. She seems to be realizing that all of the decisions and sacrifices she's made have been for nothing. She chose to bolster Aegon's claim instead of Rhaenyra's, supporting the side that discredited women as viable rulers, and now it's come back to bite her full force. She also clearly realizes what Aemond has done to his brother, and that her psychopathic son now has complete power over her and her cause. In the background of her disassociation, we hear Aemond immediately take command, most definitely having already anticipated his regency. He briskly starts giving orders, including the closing of the city gates, so word can't get out of how dire the situation in the city is really getting. We see how this decision directly impacts the small folk through the lens of Hugh Hammer, who, with persuasion from his wife, comes to realize that he will not be getting the financial support promised by King Aegon. Not only was he not paid in advance for his blacksmith services, it now seems like he won't be getting paid at all. For the sake of his extremely ill daughter, he and his family try to flee King's Landing, but are trapped inside by the closing of the gates. Aemond is a tyrant, and this is becoming abundantly clear. Following the Green Faction Small Council meeting, Alicent confronts Criston, who, despite spending many years as her most loyal follower and current fuck buddy, betrayed her by siding with Aemond's regency claim. Criston seems to be suffering from some PTSD in the wake of the Battle of Rook's Rest. In what's likely a concoction of fear of Aemond and an unwillingness to come to terms with what truly happened, he chose to support Aemond rather than Alicent. In turn, Alicent swiftly and firmly ends their affair. Let's step away from the Green Faction and move over to Daemon up in Harrenhal. In a very uncharacteristic move, rather than burn the Brackens when they chose fire over serving him, he let them live. In a surprising bout of rationality for Daemon, he realized their sheer tenacity would make them significantly more valuable to him alive in the long run. He does, however, find another way to punish them. He essentially gives House Blackwood full permission to commit war crimes on not just the Bracken lords, but the myriad of commoners that live in Bracken territory. Though this reign of terror does eventually win the submission of House Bracken, it most definitely comes back to bite Daemon. Later in the episode, a myriad of lords from throughout the Riverlands congregated at Harrenhal to confront Daemon, expressing their disgust with his facilitation of war crimes. You see, though Daemon told Willem Blackwood that the crown could not be seen as supporting this behavior, the Blackwoods conducted their horrible deeds under the Targaryen banner regardless, making it explicitly evident to the Riverlords as to who was truly to blame. These Riverlords decree that they will not be serving a tyrant like Daemon, essentially thwarting the whole reason Daemon came to Harrenhal in the first place. Whether it be due to his endless haze of visions, his selfishness, or likely a potent concoction of both, Daemon has handled his attempted conquest of the Riverlands horribly. We even finally get explicit verbal confirmation from him that he plans to betray Rhaenyra and install himself as king. However, especially in the wake of this episode, we can really say, with what army? He'll also need to regain control of his psyche if he plans on furthering his malicious goals. However, at this point, Daemon's psyche seems to be firmly in the grasp of Alice Rivers, who continues to flood him with a haze of disturbing visions, including one in which he's having sex with his own mother, who died while he was still a child. Perhaps the reason Alice has placed him under this haze in the first place is to keep him from succeeding at his selfish goals. We do get a further exploration of her magical abilities when she directly references the sexual vision Daemon had of his mother. This means that she can either see into his visions or is their creator in the first place. She also references the Blackwood war crimes against House Bracken before anyone else, stating that she hears them through the wind. I believe this implies that she has the skills to directly peer into the Weirwood network. Even Simon Strong seems more emboldened with Daemon at this point, explicitly asking him about financial compensation for all the support he has given him. Though House Strong was a wealthy house, Simon explains that Larys transferred all of the family's wealth to King's Landing, leaving those left at Harrenhal with only enough to feed and warm themselves. After a brief back and forth regarding whether Daemon should contact Rhaenyra for payment, Simon basically refuses to call Daemon king, explicitly stating he's only king consort. All in all, Daemon's grip on the Riverlands and his own sanity is rapidly slipping away. Over on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is struggling with her own hold on power. Her council becomes increasingly verbally defiant by the day. However, her new closest ally in the wake of Rhaenys' passing has seemingly become Mysaria. She explains to Rhaenyra that, given the unintentional consequences of Cole's parading of Meleys' head, now would be the perfect time to manipulate all the small folk trapped within King's Landing to her side. After all, having thousands upon thousands of people behind her when she eventually tries to take the city would be an incredible asset. Rhaenyra agrees with Mysaria's logic, sending her maid over to King's Landing to seemingly help spread this pro-Black faction rhetoric. Rhaenyra is also starting to see Baela as a stronger support asset in the wake of Rhaenys' death. We see the two comforting each other, and Baela tells the story of how Rhaenys got her dragon Meleys in the first place. Daemon had tried and failed to claim Meleys as his own, being rejected by the dragon outright. However, Rhaenys later snuck into the dragon pit, and seemingly claimed Meleys easily with no rejection, infuriating Daemon. Their conversation ends with Rhaenyra sending Baela to meet with her grandfather Corlys and offer him the hand of the queen position on her behalf. At first, Corlys is incredibly resistant, seeing this position as Rhaenyra taking more from his family rather than as an honor. However, after some effective persuasion, Baela wins him to her side. He then decides to name Baela as his heir, but she swiftly rejects this proposition. She sees herself as more of a Targaryen than a Velaryon, and says that the heir to Driftmark should be one of salt and sea, not of fire and blood. Meanwhile, Baela's sister Rhaena isn't having the best of times over in the Vale. As I predicted, Jane Arryn, ruler of the head house of the region, is not happy with Rhaenyra's skirting of the rules on their deal. If you recall, Jane Arryn pledged her support for Rhaenyra in exchange for protection from a dragon. Though Rhaenyra sent two, they are baby dragons, not yet capable of ensuring the security Jane needs. However, Jane still seems to be providing comfortable shelter and food for Rhaena, showing that she understands she is just a messenger, not the decision maker. The episode nears its end with two significant moves from the Black faction. Rhaenyra sends Sir Alfred, the most poorly behaved member of her council, off to the Riverlands to treat with Daemon at Harrenhal. She wants Sir Alfred to try to ensure Daemon's loyalty and assess his true intentions. At seemingly the same time, Jacaerys, without his mother's permission, flies to the Riverlands himself to meet with the heads of House Frey. If you recall from Game of Thrones, the Freys were the house behind the Red Wedding. House Frey controls the Twins, a bridge crossing between the Riverlands and the north. With the Stark army marching down, it would save the Starks a significant amount of time if they were to have access to this bridge. Jace ensures the Freys his dragon-based protection in exchange for the crossing, but they want more, Harrenhal for themselves. However, Jace explains that they'll need to offer more than just crossing for the Stark army if they want that castle. He says that he'll need bent knees, which, in my opinion, means that he'll need the Freys to help win over the rest of the angry Riverlands houses back to the Black faction's side. Upon returning to Dragonstone, Jace meets with Rhaenyra, who expresses that she is proud of him despite her not giving him permission to conduct this mission. The two talk further and come to realize the core of their current problems is not a lack of dragons, but a lack of riders. Other than Rhaena, who apparently almost died failing to successfully claim a dragon, all of the key members of the Black faction with Valyrian blood already have a dragon and can't bond with another. Jace cleverly realizes that if Valyrian blood is all that is needed to claim a dragon, then there are a lot of individuals out there who meet that requirement. The Targaryens having already ruled Westeros for almost 150 years at this point, many members of their family that didn't directly rule married into other houses. Additionally, though it's not explicitly said in this scene, it's been made clear throughout the season through characters like Ulf the White and Alan the Foal that those with Valyrian blood aren't afraid to father bastards either. The episode ends with Rhaenyra and Jace deciding to dive into the books and scrolls stored at Dragonstone in search of lineage outlines and family trees. This should serve as the stepping stone for finding new dragon riders for their cause. Anyway, that about wraps up this breakdown. If there's anything you think I might have missed or any questions you might have, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see future episode breakdowns, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week for Season 2, Episode 6.